Everyone in our apartment building knew my neighbors were getting divorced. It wasn't just gossip, it was impossible not to notice. The shouting carried through the thin walls, echoing down the stairwell late into the night. Doors slammed so hard, the frames rattled. Even people who normally minded their own business couldn't ignore it. They had been married for 5 years. 5 years, not a lifetime, but long enough to build something. They had a little daughter together, bought furniture on credit, even taken out a loan to purchase a used SUV that sat proudly in the parking lot, like a symbol of their young family's future. And then, suddenly, everything collapsed. None of us neighbors knew the exact reason for the divorce, but that didn't stop the speculation. They were cheating on each other, whispered the women who loved collecting rumors like souvenirs. No, it's simpler than that, others said with philosophical sighs. Love just ended. It happens. We still greeted them politely when we crossed paths on the stairs or near the mailboxes. They tried to smile back, but it was obvious the warmth was gone. The husband would mumble something barely understandable, avoiding eye contact, and hurry past us with almost desperate speed, as if escaping the building itself. They clearly didn't want to air their dirty laundry in public, which naturally made everyone even more curious. A few months later, the divorce was finalized. The real tragedy, though, wasn't their broken marriage. It was their daughter, 3-year-old Sophie. She looked like a porcelain doll. Soft blonde curls the color of warm honey, delicate cheeks, and large blue eyes that seemed far too intelligent for such a tiny child. You couldn't imagine a more fitting name for her. Sophie sounded gentle, bright, hopeful, just like she was. To everyone's surprise, the court granted custody to the father. How he managed that, no one understood. Usually mothers kept children at that age. But whispers started immediately. There's no smoke without fire, people murmured. Maybe there had been problems behind closed doors long before the divorce. Maybe things were worse than anyone knew. Whatever the truth was, the decision destroyed Sophie's mother. At first, she just looked tired. Then she started drinking. Not dramatically, not at first, just a little wine. Then stronger alcohol, then more often. Within months, it was obvious she was losing control. Every morning, neighbors saw her stumble down the stairs, carrying a heavy grocery bag. The clinking sound of bottles inside echoed through the hallway. 20 minutes later, she would return upstairs, slightly more cheerful, her steps steadier, her eyes brighter. But she always looked around nervously, hoping no one would speak to her. If someone did pass by, she would suddenly cough loudly, pretending to be sick so conversation wouldn't start. Within a year, she transformed completely. It was like watching time move in reverse, but cruelly. A young woman turned into a frail, exhausted, almost elderly figure. Her skin grew pale and dry, her posture bent forward, her voice became hoarse. It was a heartbreaking, unnatural metamorphosis. Her apartment door was often left open, wide open, as if she had forgotten it entirely. But no one dared step inside anymore. The neighbors complained loudly, though mostly out of discomfort rather than cruelty. She has no shame. She should at least close her door. Someone will steal what little she has left. Despite everything, she kept the apartment clean, floors spotless, furniture dusted, as if she were still holding on to a tiny piece of dignity. Then one spring day, she disappeared, just like that. The apartment stood empty, Neighbors gathered outside, whispering in worried voices. Maybe she went to relatives. Maybe someone finally helped her. We should have done more. They agreed that if she returned, they would try to convince her to seek treatment. But she never came back. Weeks passed, months. Eventually, a stranger moved into the apartment, a large, bearded man with an intimidating presence. He sneezed loudly, coughed constantly, and blasted music late into the night. He never greeted anyone, smoked in the stairwell, and left cigarette butts everywhere. People complained quietly but avoided confrontation. Life moved on, or at least it seemed that way. 2 years later, everything changed for me personally. I was riding a city bus home from work, exhausted after a long day, watching the golden sunlight reflect off buildings outside the window. At one stop, a woman stepped inside, holding a child's hand. She wore a long black skirt that reminded me of a nun's habit, though she wasn't actually a nun, just someone deeply religious, perhaps. Her posture was calm, steady, almost solemn. The little girl sat across from me. Blonde hair, blue eyes, serious expression. Something about her felt painfully familiar. The bus driver asked gently, "Where's your mom, sweetheart?" The girl didn't answer right away. Instead, she carefully opened a small backpack shaped like a plush kitten and took out folded bills and coins. "Thank you," she said politely after receiving her ticket. "Are you riding alone?" the driver asked. "No," the woman behind her replied calmly. "She's with me." The girl turned toward the window again, watching buildings pass by with quiet concentration. Her gestures, her voice, even the slight rasp in her speech. I had seen this child before. Then I heard the name. Sophie. And suddenly my heart jumped. It was her, our Sophie. I got off the bus right after them without even thinking. I followed them at a distance, feeling slightly ridiculous, but unable to stop myself. They walked through a small neighborhood park where patches of sunlight filtered through the trees. Children were playing near a colorful playground, their laughter echoing in the air. Sophie glanced in that direction for just a second, curiosity flickering across her face, but she didn't ask to stop. She simply kept walking beside the woman, matching her pace with quiet obedience. That detail struck me deeply. Most children her age would have begged to run toward the swings. They reached an apartment building and disappeared inside. I stood there for several minutes, staring at the entrance, trying to process what I had just seen. Questions flooded my mind. Was she happy? Who was that woman? Did Sophie know what had happened to her mother? Did she remember our building, her old home, her past life? That night I barely slept. Memories kept replaying in my head. Sophie as a toddler in the hallway, her tiny boots squeaking against the floor, her cheerful laughter echoing between the walls. The contrast between that child and the serious, quiet girl I had just seen felt almost unbearable. The next evening, after work, I returned to the same courtyard. I didn't even know exactly what I planned to do. I just knew I had to find out more. After about 20 minutes of waiting, the woman appeared near the entrance. This time she was alone. My heart started racing. I approached her, trying to look friendly rather than intrusive. "Good evening," I said with a polite smile. She turned toward me. Her face was pale, round, with deep-set gray eyes, and a slightly pursed upper lip that gave her a permanently thoughtful expression. "Yes?" she replied calmly. "I hope I'm not bothering you," I continued. "I used to work at a daycare. And yesterday I saw you on the bus with a little girl who looked very familiar to me. I think she might have been one of the children I knew." The woman didn't seem surprised at all. "Oh," she said softly. "You must mean Sophie." Hearing the name confirmed everything. "Yes," I nodded. "How is she? She always seemed like such a sweet child." The woman sighed. "She's a good girl," she said. "Very good. But life hasn't been easy for her." Then she explained. Sophie lived in an orphanage now. The woman herself worked with a church charity and sometimes took Sophie for weekends, just to give her a break from the institutional routine. I felt my stomach drop. "Her mother?" I asked carefully. The woman lowered her voice. "She completely lost herself to alcohol. One day I even saw the police picking up a group of intoxicated people from a park bench. Her mother was among them. She crossed herself quietly. 'May God protect her soul,' she murmured." "Does Sophie know?" I asked. "No," the woman said firmly. "She's too young. She doesn't need to carry that burden." "And her father?" The woman's expression hardened slightly. "He remarried. His new wife didn't want another woman's child in their home, so he gave Sophie up." The words felt like a physical blow. Somewhere deep inside me, anger ignited. How could someone abandon their own child? The woman continued speaking gently, almost philosophically. "The world is divided into people who help and people who turn away. We must choose which side we belong to." I thanked her for telling me everything. Before leaving, I asked where the orphanage was located. That night I couldn't stop thinking about Sophie, about her parents, about how fragile life could be, how quickly a child's world could collapse because of adult mistakes. Within a week, I gathered toys, clothes, and even convinced my company to donate some money for the orphanage. It wasn't much, but it felt like something. Still, it didn't feel like enough. A week later, I returned to the same courtyard again. This time I saw Sophie almost immediately. She stood near a metal drying rack, struggling to throw a heavy wet bed sheet over the top bar. The fabric kept slipping from her small hands. I walked closer. "Hey," I said warmly. "Want some help?" She turned toward me. For a second, recognition flickered in her eyes. Not because she remembered me, but because children sense kindness instinctively. "No, thank you," she replied politely. "I can do it myself." There was no stubbornness in her voice, just quiet determination. And she did manage it. Within a minute, the sheet hung like a white sail in the sunlight. I felt an unexpected surge of pride. We started talking. She answered questions thoughtfully, choosing her words carefully, almost like a tiny adult. It was both impressive and heartbreaking. "Do you like living with your aunt?" I asked gently, referring to the woman who sometimes took her home. "It's okay," Sophie said. "She's nice, but she doesn't read stories or sing songs. She mostly talks about praying and takes me to church." She paused, then added sincerely, "But she's still good." Such understanding in such a small child. When I walked her to the building entrance, she suddenly asked, "Do you have children?" The question caught me off guard. "No," I admitted. "Not yet." "If you did, would you want a boy or a girl?" Her eyes looked directly into mine. "A girl," I answered with a smile. For some reason, my vision blurred slightly with tears. That evening, when I returned home, my boyfriend Daniel was waiting for me. We had been together for over 6 months. He was kind, loyal, hard-working, a mechanic finishing his engineering certification. but I had always hesitated about marriage. Something inside me kept saying I wasn't ready yet. But that night, he looked different. New suit, fresh haircut, serious expression. Even his posture seemed straighter. "I quit smoking," he said immediately after we sat down. I blinked in surprise. "I calculated my income," he continued nervously. "It's not huge, but it's enough to start. And once I finish my certification, I'll get a better job. If we need to move to another city, we will. I'll do whatever it takes." He took a breath. "I know sometimes I say things wrong. I even bought books to improve my speech. And I stopped hanging out with guys you didn't like. My boss says I have real potential." He looked straight into my eyes. "I just want you to know, if we get married, I'll do everything I can to make us happy." The sincerity in his voice hit me harder than any grand romantic gesture ever could. "So," he asked quietly, "what do you think?" All the polite rejection words I had prepared disappeared. I took a slow breath. "Okay," I said. Relief flooded his face instantly. "I'll marry you." Then I added, "But with one condition." His expression froze. "What condition?" I smiled gently. "The first thing we do is adopt one very special little girl." For a few seconds, Daniel just stared at me. I could almost hear his thoughts racing. Adoption. A child. Right now. We hadn't even gotten married yet. I watched uncertainty pass across his face. Confusion, surprise, maybe even fear. It would have been completely understandable. Many people would have hesitated. Some would have refused immediately. Instead, he asked quietly, "Tell me about her." That was the moment I knew I had chosen the right man. I told him everything. About the neighbor's divorce, about Sophie's mother falling into alcoholism, about the father abandoning her, about the orphanage, about the serious blue eyes that carried too much life experience for such a young child. Daniel listened without interrupting. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair and exhaled slowly. "That's a lot," he admitted. "I know," I said softly. "You can say no. I'll understand." He shook his head immediately. "No," he said. "I just needed a second to think." Silence filled the room for a moment. Then he looked at me again, this time with calm determination. "If we do this," he said, "we do it together. She deserves a real family. And if you already care about her that much, then she's already part of our life." My chest tightened with emotion. "Are you sure?" I asked. He nodded. "Yeah," he said with a small smile. "I always wanted to be a dad anyway." I laughed through tears. At that moment, something inside me settled, like a puzzle piece finally clicking into place. The adoption process wasn't easy. There were documents, background checks, interviews, home inspections, financial reviews. Weeks turned into months. Sometimes the waiting felt unbearable. But Daniel never complained. He attended every meeting, filled out forms late at night after work, fixed things around the apartment to meet safety requirements, even read parenting books with surprising seriousness. One evening, after a long day, he looked at me and said, "You know, I think she's going to change our lives more than we change hers." He was right. The day we brought Sophie home felt surreal. She stood in our doorway, holding a small backpack, the same one shaped like a plush kitten, looking around cautiously. Children from orphanages often expect disappointment. They expect things to disappear. They expect adults to leave. I knelt down in front of her. "This is your home now," I said gently. She looked at me, then at Daniel. "Forever?" she asked quietly. The word hit me like a wave. Yes, Daniel answered before I could. Forever. For a moment she didn't react. Then she stepped forward and hugged him. Not tightly, almost carefully, as if she was testing whether he was real. Daniel froze for half a second, clearly overwhelmed, then wrapped his arms around her. That was the moment we officially became a family. Life didn't magically become perfect overnight. There were fears, nightmares, moments when Sophie worried we might disappear like everyone else had. But slowly, day by day, trust grew. We read bedtime stories every night. Daniel taught her how to ride a bike. We baked cookies together on weekends. Sometimes I would catch her watching us with quiet amazement, as if she still couldn't believe this life was real. Found each other. She seemed satisfied, found each other. She seemed satisfied with that. Years passed, our home filled with laughter, school projects, birthday parties, scraped knees, and bedtime giggles. One afternoon, while watching Sophie run across a playground with her friends, Daniel squeezed my hand. "Best condition you ever made," he whispered. I smiled, because I knew he was right. Sometimes life changes not because of huge, dramatic events, but because someone decides to open their heart when it would be easier to walk away. And somewhere out there, maybe Sophie's parents would never understand what they lost. But we did. We gained a daughter, and she gained a family. Forever.